Hi, I'm Dave, founder of Halloween Year Round, and we are continuing our 2024 retrospective. I'll put a link in the description to the other videos I've done so far. This one is going to be my top 10 horror movies of the year. It is probably my most anticipated video, and it's the one that all year long I'm always thinking about in the back of my mind, and I'm literally keeping a list. Like, anytime I see a movie that I like or a review that I like, I'm like, it's got to go on the list. And then this year there were like 20 movies on there, and narrowing it down to a top 10 was not very easy. Let's face it, it's been a really good year for horror movies. It's been a really good last few years for horror movies. Some would say because things are kind of chaotic and filled with turmoil in the world. And that's when horror thrives. When we need a way to process our feelings and our fears and anxieties, and horror's there for us, and it was here for us in 2024. But before I get to my top 10, like I said, there were definitely a lot of movies I really, really wanted to include, but just didn't quite make the list. I love all these movies you're about to see. I just like the 10 a little bit more. So here are my honorable mentions.
Your hand? I can't believe you're here.
There's someone coming.
I was Elvis. Those girls.
And with that out of the way, here are my top 10 favorite horror movies of 2024. Number 10, Smile 2. When I saw the first Smile, it completely blew me away. Okay, I'm not going to do that the whole video. Right from the opening scene of this one, I knew something was different about this one. When we have that whole sequence of Kyle Gallner that just goes for it. It's all one take, which I love. It was this movie's way of showing everything you loved about the first movie is gonna be amplified by 10 in this movie. And oh my god, it is. Everything from Naomi Scott's lead performance to the trauma that she's dealing with, to that really messed up scene in the car, which if you've seen it, you know what I mean, to Jack Nicholson's son, Ray Nicholson, being just as creepy as his dad in The Shining. And it just, everything works about it. This movie goes so far, goes so hard, in ways that so many other movies wouldn't dare to do. It takes, I mean, the first movie did some messed up things that, again, I think most movies wouldn't do. And this one dared itself to go even further. So I was not expecting, you know how sequels are, there's always diminishing returns, and I went into this expecting, at best, I thought, okay, it could be good, but it won't hold a candle to the first one. Not only did it surpassed the first one in just about every way. Number 9, A Quiet Place, Day 1. Speaking of sequels, or I guess prequels, that completely blew away my expectations. I did not have it on my bingo card that the prequel to A Quiet Place was going to be my favorite of the 3 movies. Now, I love the first Quiet Place. It's this great family drama / post-apocalyptic movie. Yes, I love Jim from The Office. Second one was okay for a sequel. Didn't hate it. Didn't love it. And then they come out with this, which I liked for 2 reasons. Number 1, I want to see how society falls apart. And I think with so many post-apocalyptic movies, they're too quick to get to the post-apocalypse part. And I like watching society crumble. It's just something I'm into. I'm weird. I'm crazy. Call me what you want. And secondly, that's not really what this movie is about, because mixed in this story of, this post-apocalypse and the world falling apart is a genuinely beautiful, heartfelt, poignant story about living, which I was not expecting. I was not expecting this movie to, as the youngins say, hit me in the feels the way that it did. Lupita Nyong'o is incredible in this, as is Joseph Quinn, and it completely exceeded my expectations and was so much better than a 3rd installment prequel to a franchise should be. Number 8, Strange Darling. This one kind of came out of nowhere, And there's not that much I can say about it that's not a spoiler, so I'll say this. It has elements of Tarantino with like the nonlinear storytelling and the way that it's shot and the chapters. But to just say that it's Tarantino-esque does this movie a disservice because of how much it subverts your expectations. Everything you think is happening in this movie kind of flips on its side. And you have two lead performances by Willa Fitzgerald and Kyle Gallner that show a range very few movies allow their actors to do, and just keeps you guessing. I went into this having no idea what was going to happen. And when you've seen enough movies and become as cynical as I have, that's a rare feat. And not only that, I love that it's shot on 35mm film. It looks incredible. It looks beautiful. The cinematography is amazing. Giovanni Ribisi randomly was the cinematographer. I didn't know that that was something he did, but he does. And it looks great. So it's a movie, it's gorgeously shot. It keeps you guessing. And it's just one of those movies that I walked out of it thinking, I haven't seen something that blew me away that much in a while. Number 7, Odity. For those who watch my top 10 Shudder Originals, you'll remember this movie was included on there, so I'm not going to get too into detail with it. I'll put a link in the description to that other video where I do talk about this as a Shudder Original, but I'll say this. Odity is an amazing piece of folk horror that actually manages to be scary. The opening scene kind of just starts off on this really tense note that never lets up the entire movie. It's actually unsettling. It's actually scary. That weird statue you see on the poster is the stuff of nightmares. And it twists the classic story of the supernatural, where the supernatural is not always the threat. And that's kind of all I can say without spoiling it. And kind of, I can't describe enough just how effective this movie is. Yes, it follows some of the tropes, but it follows them so incredibly well that you don't mind it. And it actually leaves you with a sense of dread. Number 6, Heretic. Who Had Hugh Grant is an amazing horror villain on their 2024 bingo card, because I certainly didn't. I think I probably like this one a lot more than other people because I love sort of the philosophical religious debate of it, and I love that it can be at the center of a horror film. I mean, people were calling this Saw for Mormons, but it's so much more than that. It's philosophical horror as opposed to psychological horror, where you find yourself kind of agreeing with our villain to a point, and then you find yourself being horrified by him, and it floods you with these mixed emotions. And it's a movie that, well, for a movie that most of it is just them in a room talking, keeps you entertained with a really interesting script and just amazing performances from all three of its leads, not just Hugh Grant, although I know he's getting all the attention. And I feel like the way you know that Heretic is really effective at what it does and that it's so well made is that you have people, both religious and non-religious, really enjoying it, because it would have been so easy for the movie to feel like it was propaganda for one side or the other. And it doesn't. It keeps it... It remembers that it's a very complex issue, and it tackles it in a very complex, interesting way. That it still allows you, the audience, to kind of take your own interpretation. Was this character right? Was this character wrong? What is the correct whatever? Without feeling like a cop-out. And again, I cannot stress how much I love Hugh Grant in this movie. He takes that, like, nervous, awkward, bumbling British guy that always worked for him in 90s romantic comedies with Renee Zellweger, but kind of works here because in a different context, his awkward, bumbling nature is kind of terrifying if you don't know if he's going to let you out of his house. Number 5, Late Night with the Devil. Again, if you watch my top 10 Shudder Originals, this one was on that one, so I'll recap it a little bit for here. But again, link in the description to that other video. I love the history of television. I love my late night shows. I love my Conan O'Brien. I love my David Letterman. Johnny Carson was before my time, but I've always been entertained by like clips of him on YouTube. And this movie feels like it gets the era right. I love it when a movie almost tricks you into thinking it could have been made in the era that it's from. Ty West did it with House of the Devil. The Love Witch kind of did it with like that late 60s, early 70s folk horror. And this does it in that you almost believe this could have been a TV special and like lost footage or whatever that was buried because of what happened. I also love that you have something like demonic possession that's often kept in the shadows and kind of put front and center where we're challenging it, from a skeptical perspective. And I can't praise David Dastmalchian enough, a guy that has always owned every supporting role he's ever done, whether it was The Dark Knight, whether it was Ant-Man, whether it was The Suicide Squad. Here he shows us that he's leading man material and he needs to get more lead roles. So this movie it was, spoilers, it was my favorite Shudder movie of the year, and it's on this list for a reason too. Number 4, Immaculate. Fun fact number 1, I saw Immaculate and Late Night with the Devil on the same night in a back-to-back double feature. What a night that was. Fun fact number 2, you will probably notice that another movie that a lot of people have on their list for best movies of the year is absent from my list, and the inclusion of Immaculate helps explain why that other movie is not on it, although if you watch that other video, which I'll link to in the description, you'll know why that one's not on here. Immaculate goes so much harder than I thought it would. That final few minutes that allegedly someone vomited in the theater, I'm watching it going, oh my god, are you gonna do that? And then it does. And for a movie to get that visceral reaction out of me, kudos. I also kind of love the fact that this was a movie that was in development for nearly a decade and that Sydney Sweeney had been attached for all those years. And then it got to the point that she's like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to produce the movie myself. I'm going to get it made. It came out around the same time as Madam Web, which sucked. But this one showed she's a really talented actress, and she deserves better than Madam Web. She deserves more indie, low-budget horror movies like this one. And I hope she produces them more. I hope she makes more of her own opportunities. And without naming that other movie that you probably all know is the one I'm referring to that was kind of similar about, giving birth, nun, pregnant, evil, demon, whatever. This movie is tonally consistent and doesn't break its own internal logic or violate the continuity of a long-standing beloved horror classic like that other one does, and that is why Immaculate is on my list. It is why Immaculate is the better of the two movies, and it's why I'm talking about it now. Number 3, The Substance. This movie. So, I love it when a movie is just willing to go for it. And The Substance, it starts off as oh, this is going to be an interesting horror drama about the anxiety and fears of aging, and this is so cool. You've got Demi Moore, and it's could it be almost autobiographical because, people are brutal to her in the tabloids and all that, and you've got Margaret Qualley, and this is all working and interesting. And then it just goes for it. The movie continuously ups its own ante in ridiculousness and absurdity, but still all in the service of its central thesis. It's body horror, but it's body horror that just keeps going and going and going, where in the beginning it's this almost grounded, kind of relatable movie about, we're all afraid of aging. It's something none of us can escape, despite an entire industry existing claiming that for a small price we can escape it. It goes from that to this bizarro, messed up Cinderella story where by midnight all hell's gonna break loose. And I love that a movie can do that. I love that it can do all these things, but also, again, have something interesting to say. Some of it is very overt. Some of it isn't. Some of it you kind of read into. And it's a movie that you can study for academic purposes. Or it's a movie you can just be entertained by how insane the last 30 minutes gets. Number 2, Longlegs. Make me make this number 2. If not, I'll have to come back. Not once, not twice, but as many times as I like. I'm not going to attempt to hit that note because it would blow up my microphone. But Longlegs, again, I love when a movie can make me feel something. On the surface, it's a pretty straightforward plot. Like, it's your typical, police procedural crime thriller mystery. Yes, it has elements of Silence of the Lambs. Yes, our lead character is Clarice-esque, but it's so much more than that. Its overall style and tone evokes a feeling. And again, that's something that's very hard to do, especially with a desensitized horror fan like myself. It creates a sense of suspense. It creates a sense of dread. It creates its own... Longlegs is used just sparingly enough that there's a sense of mystery to him, that even when we see him, there's like so much being unsaid, and there's something almost, and I use the word very carefully, there's something almost hypnotic about it. Nicolas Cage, I knew he was in the movie, and it still took me a minute to be like, oh, that's Nicolas Cage, even though I knew which character he was playing, because he loses himself that much into the role. And this is just a prime example of why he thrives in indie horror. He can take his overall strangeness and insanity and just dial it up to 11, and it works perfectly. And finally, number 1, Nosferatu. I intentionally held off filming this video until I saw Nosferatu. And the fact that it's number 1 kind of reveals why. I've been a fan of Robert Eggers ever since The Witch. I love The Lighthouse. I love The Northman. He has this insane devotion and attention to detail, especially when it comes to historical accuracy, down to like every little thing around it. And it creates an atmosphere that feels lived in. Story-wise, yes, it's kind of just an adaptation of Dracula. It's Nosferatu in name and in style and tone and in setting. And I kind of love that it is. I love that he didn't just do a Dracula. He's like, no, this has to be Nosferatu. I love everything about this movie. The set design, the costumes, the period dialogue. The fact that I now say things like crow of cock, to me in the morning at cock crow. It's going to catch on. And definitely not get this video flagged or whatever. Performances are great all around. But I feel like even more so than Bill Skarsgård, who is used just sparingly enough to keep Count Orlok scary, Lily Rose Depp is on another level, and so is Willem Dafoe. The two of them steal every single scene that they're in. Nosferatu wins number 1 simply because every single piece about it is perfection. It is perfectly written, it is perfectly acted, it is perfectly directed, it is perfectly costume designed, it is perfectly set designed, it is perfectly paced. Everything about it works. It actually manages to make vampires scary again, and it's a movie that almost hypnotizes its audience, much like Count Orlok. But hey, this is just my list. These are just my 10 favorite horror movies of the year. I would love to know what yours are. Let me know in the comments, what were your favorite horror movies of the year? Which ones did I miss? Which ones are you mad that I excluded? Whatever. Like, share, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. If you don't, you may be stuck in a room with 2,000 live rats like Willem Dafoe was on the set of Nosferatu. And as always, every day is Halloween.